This week's Parsha, Parshas Yisro, has a wealth of different interesting topics, of course, highlighted with the giving of the Torah and the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments. But I would like to focus not only the beginning of the Parsha, but actually literally on the first word. The first word of the Parsha is Vayishma. Vayishma means, and he heard. Vayishma Yisro, and Yisro heard. What did Yisro hear? Yisro heard about all the miracles that took place in Egypt. And he heard about all the wonders and miraculous events that the Jewish people were fortunate to be the recipient of. And he came to Mount Sinai to spend time with his son-in-law, Moshe. His son-in-law Moshe was, of course, the leader of the Jewish people, and Tzipporah, Moshe's wife, and Moshe's children were at Yisro's house during the entire episode of the Exodus to Egypt. So now he's bringing them for a reunification. What's very interesting is this: Vayishma Yisro, Yisro heard. But the question is, didn't everybody hear? This wasn't news that was unique to one person. Vayishma Yisro, he heard, everybody heard. So Rashi famously says the following powerful words: Ma shmua shama uba. What did he hear that he actually came? Meaning as follows, translation. Everybody heard the news. Everybody was inspired. Everybody said, wow, there's a God. But how many people actually did that distill into something concrete and tangible? One person, Yisro. Yisro was the only one that came to Mount Sinai because of his inspiration. The question is, out of the whole world, everybody heard the news, the great miracles that occurred in Egypt. There was only one person, one individual, Yisro, that came to Mount Sinai. And the reality we learn from over here is very known to us. And that is that in life, many people get inspired. We get inspired, some of us often, some of us less frequently, but we get inspired. The question is, how many times does that lead to real change? And the reality is, many times, inspiration is just temporary and doesn't translate into real and tangible change. And because it doesn't translate into real and tangible change, a short while later, people can just go back to the way they were before they were inspired. What's the trick to making sure that the inspiration is actually translated into a real and tangible outcome? It has to be harnessed to an action. You can't just be inspired in theory. You have to harness that into a reality. And that's what Yisro did. Ma shmua shama uba. Yisro just didn't hear. He actually acted on the inspiration. He came, he moved, he acted. That was what was unique to Yisro. So I think the important lesson for all of us is, of course, many times we get inspired with different messages, with different moments in life. The question we have to ask ourselves, is this just going to be a temporary, brief moment of inspiration, or is this going to be meaningful and lasting? Let us remember the lesson of Yisro, and remember that he was the only one that harnessed that inspiration into real change. Wish you all a good Erev Shabbos.